Picture this. You walk into a friend's apartment and something feels dump off, but in a good way. The space is breathing. There's room to think. You notice their kitchen counter actually visible, their living room calm, intentional, almost meditative, asterisk. Then you go home to your own place. Closet exploding, desk buried under 3 layers of aisle. Deal with this later. Counter covered in things you don't remember buying. And here's the kicker, you feel it in your chest. That low-grade anxiety that never quite goes away. Asterisk. So what's really happening here? Why do some people seem to thrive with almost nothing, while others drown in stuff they don't even want? Asterisk. The answer isn't what you think. This isn't about willpower. It's not about being better at life. The psychology behind minimalism reveals something far more fascinating, and it starts in your brain. Long before you ever buy that thing you'll regret tomorrow. Asterisk. Let's talk about what clutter is actually doing to your brain right now. There's a psychological trait called need for cognitive closure. Basically, it's your brain's hunger for resolved tasks and clear environments. And here's what nobody tells you. Every single object in your visual field is an open loop in your mind. That stack of mail, unfinished business, screaming at your subconscious. Those clothes draped over the chair, a decision you're avoiding. The 20 coffee mugs in your cabinet, a daily reminder that you can't find what you need when you need it. Neuroscience backs this up. Recent studies using fMRI scans found that visual clutter literally triggers your brain's stress response, the same response activated when you're in actual danger. Your cortisol levels spike. Your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for decision-making and focus, gets overwhelmed. People drawn to minimalism. Their brains are wired to feel this more intensely. They're not being dramatic when they say clutter stresses them out. Their neural pathways genuinely process environmental chaos as a threat. But here's what makes this fascinating. It's not universal. Some people's brains handle clutter just fine. They can work surrounded by papers, books, half-finished projects, and feel completely at ease. The difference isn't discipline, it's neurology. Think about the last time you cleaned your desk completely. Remember that feeling? That sudden ability to think clearly. That wasn't just psychological. That was your prefrontal cortex sighing with relief, finally free to do its actual job instead of constantly processing background noise. Minimalists chase that feeling, not because they're obsessed with perfection, but because their brains literally function better in simplified spaces. They're not trying to deprive themselves, they're trying to survive. Now, let's dig into something deeper. Control. Psychologists measure something called locus of control, where you believe control in your life actually comes from. External locus. You think outside forces determine your fate? Internal locus? You believe you shape your own outcomes. And here's where it gets interesting with minimalism. People with external locus of control are advertisers' dream targets. They genuinely believe the right purchase will transform their lives. New phone, new me, new outfit, new confidence, new gadget. Finally, I'll be productive. They're not stupid. They're just wired to seek solutions outside themselves. Operate differently. They've developed or were born with an internal locus of control. They think, I create my own happiness. I solve my own problems. Objects are just tools, not salvation. This shows up in fascinating ways. Consumer behavior. Studies reveal that minimalists are remarkably resistant to social pressure. When everyone's buying the latest thing, minimalists ask, but do I actually need this? Or am I just feeling left out? They're not being contrarian. They're genuinely unbothered by what others think they should own. Here's the paradox. By owning less, they feel more in control. Every possession you own actually owns a piece of you, your time, your mental energy, your physical space, your money for maintenance or storage. Minimalists understand this instinctively. Fewer possessions means fewer things controlling them. They've discovered what Buddhism has taught for millennia. Attachment creates suffering. But they arrived at this conclusion through personal experience, not philosophy. Let's get brutally honest about why we actually buy things. Psychologist Tim Kasser spent decades researching materialism, and his findings are uncomfortable. People who chase possessions are often trying to fill psychological gaps. Insecurity, low need for external validation. The expensive car isn't about transportation, it's about proving you've made it. The designer bag isn't about carrying stuff, it's about signaling status. The massive house isn't about shelter, it's about showing the world you matter. But here's what minimalists figured out. Objects make terrible identity markers. They've found validation elsewhere through relationships, through experiences, through who they are rather than what they own. And neuroscience explains why this works better. Van Boven and Gilovich's research reveals something powerful. Experiential purchases create longer-lasting satisfaction than material ones. Your brain remembers the concert, the trip, the dinner, with friends far more vividly than it remembers buying a new TV. Why? Because experiences connect to your sense of self differently. You are someone who traveled to Japan. You have a TV? See the difference? Minimalists intuitively grasp this. They'd rather spend money on learning guitar than buying one to display, on taking a photography class than buying an expensive camera that sits in a closet, on cooking dinner with friends than showing off a fancy kitchen they rarely use. This isn't about being cheap or anti-consumerist. It's about understanding how human memory and identity actually work. When minimalists look back on their lives, they're not remembering their possessions. They're remembering what they did, who they loved, what they learned. And here's the brutal truth. Nobody else remembers your possessions either. Think about people who've passed away. What do we remember? Their things? Or their impact? Their stories? Their presence in our lives? About 20% of the population has something called sensory processing sensitivity. If you're in this group, the world is genuinely louder, brighter, more overwhelming than it is for others. For these people, a cluttered room isn't just messy, it's actually painful. Each object competes for attention. Every surface screams for processing. The brain never gets to rest. And here's what's wild. We're living in the most overstimulating era in human history. Your ancestors saw maybe a few dozen people per day. You see thousands of faces scrolling social media before breakfast. Your ancestors owned maybe a few dozen objects total? You probably own thousands. MRI studies show that highly sensitive people's brains react more intensely to visual clutter. The amygdala, stress center, lights up like a Christmas tree. The sympathetic nervous system kicks into overdrive. For these people, minimalism isn't a trend. It's survival. And it doesn't stop at physical stuff. Notice how minimalists often have simple schedules, fewer commitments, streamlined routines. They're not being antisocial, they're managing their nervous system. In a world that's constantly screaming for your attention, minimalism is a form of self-defense. It's creating sanctuary in a chaotic world. Here's the final piece. Time perspective. Psychologists identify different ways people relate to time. Some live purely in the present, immediate gratification rules everything. Others balance present and future. And some are heavily future-oriented. Minimalists tend to fall into that last category. When they consider buying something, they're running a complex mental simulation. Do I want this? Okay, but will I want this in 6 months? A year? Where will I store it? What happens when I move? Will this add value to my future self, or create a problem for them to solve? This isn't overthinking, it's realistic thinking. Because here's what present-focused people miss. Every purchase is a decision you're making for your future self. And your future self has to deal with the consequences. Research confirms this pattern. Future-oriented people save more money. They maintain healthier habits. They avoid impulsive choices that feel good now but hurt later. Minimalism fits this perfectly. But here's the deeper insight. Minimalism is compound interest for your mental energy. Every item you don't buy is decision fatigue you avoid. Every possession you don't own is time you don't spend managing it. Every commitment you don't make is freedom you preserve. Minimalists aren't depriving themselves. They're investing in future freedom. So here's the truth about minimalism. It's not a lifestyle choice you force yourself into. It's a natural expression of how certain brains work. If you're drawn to it, you probably have a brain that craves cognitive closure, values autonomy, finds identity in experiences, or thinks carefully about long-term consequences. And that's not better or worse, it's just how you're wired. But if minimalism feels wrong to you, if you love your collections, find comfort in abundance, thrive, surrounded by variety, that's equally valid. Your brain works differently, and that's okay. The real insight isn't everyone should be minimalist. It's understand your own psychology and build a life that works with your brain, not against it. Because the goal isn't less stuff or more stuff. The goal is less stress, more freedom, more alignment between who you are and how you live. And that looks different for everyone. If this resonated with you, drop a comment about which psychological trait you connected with most. Subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden psychology behind how we live. And remember, the most powerful thing you can own is self-knowledge. See you in the next one.